Namaste and welcome from the Center for Indic Studies. We are very excited to have Professor Sudhir Sopory as our seminar speaker for this month. And the topic is something which I'm sure is close to the hearts of all of you. Most of us are in higher education or have some strong linkages to higher education. So what is the status of higher education in India? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? Um, as you all know, India has undertaken a unique experiment in terms of providing access to higher education to a very large population. I think the most recent numbers are upwards of 42 million. 42 million in higher education every year. And the only country that has done even better is China. But China, as you know, has one tremendous advantage, and that is language, just one language. In our case, as you all know, we are dealing with many, many languages. And so that creates even a more challenge. But besides access, there is also this very important criterion of quality. And there are some issues with that. I will just give you two kind of unrelated data points. One, a CEO of a IT company, a major public individual in India, he mentioned in an interview that when his company hires these IT graduates from higher educational universities and colleges in India, they don't really have the skills that are needed for them to be put into a project. So that company, it spends a lot of money, a lot of time in preparing these students, these hires, so that then they can be put into projects. And the other data point that came to my mind just a few moments ago is all of us remember just a couple of years ago when the Russia-Ukraine war started. India did a massive evacuation of its students, Indian students in Ukraine. And most of them were pursuing medical education. So why in Ukraine? I mean, there are some countries which have been a major source for Indian students, a major destination for Indian students, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. These are, of course, the English-speaking countries. And then we have now some European countries which have had very good programs to attract Indian students, Germany, France. But Ukraine, I don't think is in that league. But anyway, so the point being that something maybe is lacking in terms of quality of higher education in India. So this is a topic which I'm sure you all would like to discuss and hear from. And there is nobody to tell us better about this than Professor Sudhir Sopory, who wears many hats. The most, I guess, appropriate in this case would be his vice chancellorship of Jawaharlal Nehru University, which, as I'm sure he will mention, tried a very unique way to attract, to provide access to students that do not come from the traditional background for higher education. So Professor Sopory is not only a very distinguished academic, but he is also a very inspiring teacher. Some of his students are in this Zoom session with us, and they have told me personally how much they have been influenced by Professor Sopory's conduct. I mean, in the Indic tradition, one of the Sanskrit words that we use for a teacher is acharya. And if you go to the root of it, acharya means somebody from whose achar you get inspiration. That means how that person lives his or her life, not just the intellectual um, transfer of knowledge, but the conduct. So we are very, very fortunate to have Professor Sopory, and I will request now Professor Girish Jha to formally introduce Professor Sopory to our audience. Girish ji, you are muted, Girish ji. Girish ji, you are muted.
Okay, can you hear me now, right?
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Sukalyanji. It's an honor for me to introduce Professor Sopory, who was our Vice Chancellor, and as you know, an eminent academic and an outstanding researcher. Currently, he is engaged with the ICGEB, and he's the Professor Emeritus, Senior Professor Emeritus over there. And before that stint, he was the Vice Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University from 2011 to 16. And we all know those were the most peaceful and years of academic progress in Jawaharlal Nehru University. And before that, he was a visiting professor at Humboldt, professor in the Botanical Institute, Institute of Botany at University of Munich. And before that, plant molecular biology lab at University of Maryland. And most of his career was in JNU. He joined JNU in 1973 as assistant professor, and then associate professor, and then professor from 1985. But before that, he had two very important stints at the Max Planck Institute and as the Fulbright Fellow at University of Texas. And Professor Sopory has a mind-boggling repertoire of awards. Almost every year, he got a very important award. And one of the most important ones would be the Padma Shri Award in 2007, and Lifetime Achievement Award for Biotechnology, Society of India in 2017, and also Birbal Sahni Award and Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award. But if you really look at his biodata, the most significant is actually that he works on plant communication and how plants manage their stress, and in stress, how they communicate. So he's been working towards understanding the mechanism of abiotic stress tolerance in plants. His group has underscored the role of different genes, and more specifically the gliocellase pathway in stress tolerance, crosstalk between different stresses and light responses in regulating the expression of genes, including regulation via microRNAs, is under investigation. Currently, the group is working to understand the molecular basis of stress priming mediated response and stress memory. I was wondering, if we can know about how the plants manage their stress and communicate among each other, and also warn of a potential danger and interaction to the neighboring plants. How are not humans doing the same thing? Humans should be also communicating better when they are in stress, and that would be key to their good health. And most importantly about Professor Sopory has been his key interest in Vedanta, and he's a practitioner of Vedanta. I remember when we brought Vedanta actually to India in the 19th or 20th. Vedanta was actually done in JNU. Professor Sopory was the keynote speaker, and his paper on his Vedanta practices actually is published, in our volume. So I'm really very, very fortunate, that I had opportunity to work under him at JNU. I learned a lot from him. And we also started an agreement with an NGO to promote Sharada script revival in JNU, and I started working on the font editor for Sharada, and I'm still not finding time to complete the process. See, because of the script question, the question of multilinguality, the question of the content, the paucity in Indian language. All of these are affecting education in India. And as you know that we at the Commission for Scientific and Technical Terminology are creating a lot of vocabulary for Indian languages. And unless we have vocabulary, we can't create content. Unless we have content, we can't educate our people. So 200 years, so we are going to complete 200 years of English Education Act in 2035. And after 200 years, we still have only 10% people of India actually speaking English and knowing English. So the 90% people of India have to be delivered education right at their doorstep in their language, in their medium. And that would be the real challenge that we were talking about. And the multilinguality certainly is a challenge, but also an advantage, in India, and that we have to leverage with the use of technology and the new education policy, actually talking about all of that. So will be very glad to hear from Professor Sopory, who has had a direct experience in managing a very diverse university like JNU, and keeping JNU quite peaceful and very academically, vibrant during his stint from 11 to 16 in JNU. I will still, mention that the times we spent in JNU during Professor Sopory's time, his persona, his smiling nature, his technique of handling crisis in JNU, all of that, so remarkable, so inspiring. So I'm very fortunate again to Kalyanji for having gotten this opportunity to introduce Professor Sopory in this talk. So thank you so much, and I would like to now invite Professor Sopory to deliver his talk.
Thank you, Professor Girish, for your introduction. Longish one, but I think it has been always a pleasure for me to have interacted with people like you in JNU when I was there. And I'm also thankful to Dr. Sukalyan Sen Gupta ji for inviting me on this forum to speak on a subject which he decided to talk on Indian education system. And I'm happy that I'm talking on this platform of Center of Indic Studies, where I have known many people who have been working in this institute there. As this was mentioned by Girish ji, that I'm basically a scientist working on plants, trying to understand how plants react to the environment, how they establish themselves, and at the same time, while facing many vagaries of environment, they produce a lot of good medicines, fruits, flowers, and all these for the benefit of the humankind, for everybody. They do that one. Now, I always use this analogy. I feel that the education system should learn from these plants, where we can train both boys and girls who will remain established in their own culture, just like plants are established at one place through their root system. And they can envisage different changes in their surrounding society, establish themselves in their own domain of knowledge and training which they get. And with this background, they will be able to help not only themselves, but just like for plants, they can also help the society at large. Now, education in a country like India is a major challenge because of the population that we are having, one of the largest population on this planet at present time. But education is very important for the development of any country, because an educated person, it boosts its confidence, brings about hope. It produces independent thinking in the person, inspires problem-solving skills, and open doors to career advancements, and creates employment opportunities. And through this, it is possible to reduce the poverty in the country. So this remains a very critical thing, that how do we educate a large population in our country. Now, this is the broader question on which Dr. Sen Gupta also reflected upon, is whether it is possible to provide this opportunity of education, not only primary education, but higher education, to the best of the talent that exists in this country. This question assumes importance if many of you would know that presently, India has the largest adolescent population in the world today. Roughly around 248 million people in the age group of 15 to 24 years are those who are aspiring to get education or even higher education, and they need access to this education system. There are many government programs which have been initiated. Especially many of you may have heard about the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, where about 200 million children, which are residing in over 1 million habitations, has been developed, which is one of the largest elementary education system initiated in this country. Now, how do you take this large group of students who will be educated to higher education system with the limited opportunities that exist at present? In fact, this is a tremendous problem. I was once in Bihar for some other work, appointing some vice chancellors and others, and I happened to meet one of the Minister of Education there. And he told me that every year in the state of Bihar, millions of students, they come out of the school system who pass 10 plus 12 examinations. Now his problem is, how do they find admission in colleges and later on in the universities? Because there aren't enough places who can accommodate this large number of students. In fact, he asked me, because a lot of students from the state do come to Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he told me that why can't you open a campus of JNU in Bihar itself, so that the students will get an opportunity to get themselves educated right where they are. Now, I'll briefly talk about some of these issues, which is the issue of accessibility to education, the quality of education, and as Suklan talked about, the employability of these students who come out of these education systems. But before that, let me briefly tell you about the early education system and the evolution of the education system in this country. Now, higher education is not a recent phenomena in India. In fact, higher education started with an ancient system of education right from the Vedic period in this country. This was both education for materialistic view as also the spiritual views, which then constituted the Gurukul system of imparting knowledge of scriptures, as also the behavior of living in a contemporary society. Thus, the Indian subcontinent has a long history of education and learning, right from the era of Indus Valley civilization. And many ancient institutions of learning were thriving those times. Many of you would know about the Takshila, the Nalanda, the Vallabhi University, Pushpagari Vihara, and Sharda Peeth in Kashmir, from where I come from, and now it is a part of the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and many other institutions which were thriving at that time. Now, these institutions of learning were there much before many of these were created even other part of the world. However, during the medieval times, when the Muslim rulers came to this country, they end up destroying many of these institutions. Not only the institutions were destroyed, but also a lot of the literature which was produced by these institutions was destroyed, and a totally different system of education, which is mostly the madrasa system of education, was started in this country. And some of this is still going on at that time. However, during the British period, there was an idea of establishing universities in India, basically on the pattern of London University, which was promoted somewhere in 1854 when first Sir Charles Wood came to this country. They wanted to start higher education in India in the field of arts, sciences, philosophy, literature, and later on also in law, medicine, engineering, and other places. And accordingly, as you would know, that some of the earlier universities which came up around that time were the universities of Calcutta, the University of Bombay and Madras, and later on other universities also started coming up. However, after independence, a great emphasis, the first Prime Minister and later on those who followed, gave importance to education system and started looking at what kind of a system should be developed in the country at that moment of time. As chair of the Education Commission in 1948, you will remember that Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, who later on became the president of the country, recommended the reconstruction of university education in India and said that this was essential to meet the demand for scientific, technical, and other human power, which was needed for the socio-economic development of the country. That commission which he was heading was also in favor of the idea of setting up rural universities to meet the need of rural reconstruction in industry, agriculture, and various walks of life. Now, this is something which has still not happened, this rural university concept, except in the agriculture sector, some of this has been realized. The most important document which was produced post-independence was in the 60s, and this was an education commission which was formed under the chairmanship of Dr. D.S. Kothari, who also was the chancellor of our university in JNU a long time back. And he said, Indian education needs a drastic reconstruction, almost a revolution. We need to introduce work experience as an integral element of general education, to improve quality of teachers at all levels, to strengthen centers of advanced studies, and strive to attain the same in our universities, at the least in higher international standards. He laid special emphasis on the combination of teaching and research, because most of the time it was our earlier universities were spending a lot more time on teaching, but he said research has to become an important component of our university systems. Some of these objectives have been met by the following governments, but still falling short of the requirement of the country. Later on in 1986, the education policy which was developed pinpointedly mentioned the 3 areas of concern in Indian education system. This was the expansion of higher education, improvement of the quality of higher education, and increased relevance and job orientation in higher education in the countries. And it's only in 2020 that another education policy, what we call as the new education policy, has been developed, which was headed by the person who was also the Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University. And this policy framework has brought out many different changes in the system, and hopefully, we hope that these will be implemented over a period of time. And one of the points which Professor Girish was mentioning, that this country, very few people still speak English language, but a lot of the education system in many of the states at the lower level is carried out in their own native languages. And this particular education policy has said that let the education be given in their mother tongue language to begin with, and later on it can be shifted to other languages. So this is one major change which hope will be adopted in future years. Now, the challenges of higher education in India, I feel that they revolve around 5 basic E's, which I says, 5 E's. The first one, expansion, equity and accessibility, that is participation of wider sections of the society, excellence, empowerment, and finally, ethics and values in education system. Let me briefly touch on each of these points in this topic. Now, post-independence, as I was mentioning, it saw a steady expansion of higher education institutions in this country. Today, if you see, the education system in India is one of the largest worldwide. I think it is somewhere the 3rd largest in the world. This has more than 1,000 plus universities and over 42,000 or even more colleges which exist. I'm basically talking about higher education, that is college education and university education, and not concentrating on the school education in this. Now, these higher education systems, they include basically the central universities, which are supported by the federal government. There are state universities supported by each individual state, and they control that education system there. A lot of private universities which have come up. And besides these systems of universities, you also have very famous, what we all know is the Indian Institutes of Technologies, IITs, National Institute of Technologies, and last decade, they also developed to improve the science and technology in this country, what we call the ISER systems, Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research. And there are currently 7 of these institutions which are there, which provide education right from undergraduate to PhD level in sciences. And this was just to boost the science education in the country. In addition to this broad framework, you also have to see that there are a lot of medical colleges, what we call the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, which are replicated in many states nowadays. And there are many specialized institutions which have come up. You will see that in some states they have a university like Petroleum University. You have the law universities which are already there. And other than that, there are a lot of agriculture universities and agriculture institutions. Some of you may have known that in this country, for every cropland, there is an institution for doing teaching as well as research in those aspects of this. And this support for the expansion program is continuing over the years since independence. And some of you may have read that last month itself, Prime Minister Modi announced and inaugurated multiple educational projects in institutes and universities. I think he announced support to the tune of almost like $100 million to some of these institutions. Now, I was reading a report from Satish Deshpande's paper, and he said that in the last 2 decades, the world has seen an unprecedented massification of higher education. That is an expansion of enrollment in higher education, which he's talking about. While significant increase of this has occurred in most countries in every region, the most spectacular rise in enrollment has happened in China and India, as Dr. Sengupta was talking about in China, where first generation, the good point about this was that in this enrollment which is going on, the first generation entrants are accessing higher education on a scale which is unknown in the human history. Now, if you look at the information which is given to us from UNESCO, that also shows that the global enrollment has increased 2.5 times at global level between 2000 and 2020. But in comparison, if you look to the global scale, the enrollment in Indian higher education has registered a 4.5 times increase, and that was roughly from 86 lakhs in 2000 to 385 lakhs, which has gone into 2020. And in the same period, the gross enrollment ratio, which always had been a concern in this country, has now reached roughly around 27%, which is still very, very low compared to many of the countries worldwide. Now, one of the contributors in this expansion programs in this country has been privatization of higher education in the 21st century. Towards 1990s, many of the institutions which were funded and supported by private organizations came up, and they cater to the education of this of the population in this country. But their growth has been so rapid during the last 2 decades that by 2020, they say that around 80% of the institutions are now privately managed, and they account for 2/3 of the total enrollment in this country. And many of these enrollment are for the new students. But the problem in these private institutions, which I feel is still that it is not accessible to lower income group because of the high fee structure which exists in these places. Now, with the new education policy which has come up, as I was mentioning, in 2020, it is very clear that education is expected to play a very significant role in preparing students for higher education. The policy which they have framed up and the kind of work plan which has been brought out in these education policy, they feel that by 2035, the gross enrollment ratio in this country must go up to 50%. And this actually requires significant efforts to improve basically the school education, because there is a connection between the good school education system and then that with the higher education, in increase in access to the higher education. Now, the second point which I want to bring about is equity and accessibility. It was in 1929, which was through the Geneva Declaration, a resolution was taken that every child must be given right to education, which meant that each child be educated in a manner that she can make a living. Now, this right to education was also brought up in the Indian context a decade back, and government reenacted this scheme, which is called RTE Act, Right to Education Act, in this country. Now, despite this expansion program which I was talking about, the gross enrollment ratio in higher education, as I was mentioning, is still very, very, very low. And not only it is low, but the access to the education has remained unequal across the socio-economic status around the regions as well as the gender. And I was mentioning that this is partly because of the fee structure which has remained higher in many of the education institutions. For example, getting educated in IITs or ISERs for a common person is not as easy because of the education system. I remember one of the students who was studying in JNU in life sciences. He came once to my office and told me that he had got admitted in IIT Kharagpur and also got admission in JNU, while he would have liked to go to IIT because of many reasons, but because of the fee structure, he could not afford to go there, and therefore he selected JNU to come and study here for his PhD program. And JNU had a great structure which was there, that the fee structure was low, and people from lower background, from different background, from marginal backgrounds, who were given different marks, special marks were given to them so that they get access to higher education. This was an education entrance policy, admission policy, which this university had adopted long back in order to see that people from marginal areas, from low income areas are able to come to higher education. Now, if you look at the numbers, it is still very disturbing that they're saying that over 5.4 million graduates and 1 more million postgraduates are still aspiring to get into higher education system. And out of 12 crore children, only 1 crore children have access to higher education in good institutions. But during the last few decades, the situation of accessibility is showing some positive change. And this was following the implementation of policy of reservations, which was brought in. Although there had been policy of reservation for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe students, but a decade back, government increased the budget of many of the central universities to increase the intake of other backward classes in the university systems. So there was an increase of jump of almost like 27% increase of students coming from different backgrounds. Currently, if you look at many higher education systems, both at the student level as well as the faculty level, you have reservations of up to 50%, 48% reservations for the students and for the teachers from different strata of the society. Another positive trend which we see during the last many decades is the enrollment of girls and women in higher education system. And specific policies have been adopted, especially in the JNU where I was there. We kept special marks, about 5 marks extra for women students, so that they get opportunity of getting educated in higher education system. And by the time I think I left, we had almost like 50% or even more girl students in the university, as many boy students, 50% boy student. But this is something which this gender gap still needs to be filled up in many, many higher education systems, especially at the state level. And there are many differences. Actually, we have to realize that in this country, you have federal level universities and state level universities, and there are a lot of differences in the education pattern, in the enrollment pattern from central universities vis-a-vis state universities. Now, to give you the example of how difficult it is to get entry into this higher education system of good institutions like IITs and in medical institutions, good medical institutions. I'll just give you an example from this year. Now, for getting entry into the IIT systems, you have a joint entrance examination system, which is conducted by national testing agencies. Now, this year, you can imagine that 1.2 million students, 1.2 million students appear in these joint entrance examinations in 291, in almost like 5,000 centers in 291 cities across the country. And this is for how many seats? About 5,000 seats in all the IITs which are there. Now, this is inclusive of, and this number of admissions which are occurring, I'm talking about, is inclusive of SC, ST, and other students which are there. Now look at the students who are aspiring to get into the medical education system. And there is a national test which is called the NEET examination. And how many students appeared this year? 21 lakh students appear in this test. And for the common entrance examination for higher universities in central universities, which are about 48 in number, 16 lakh students appear for these universities. And how many seats there is 3 lakh students. I will tell you the example of the Jawaharlal Nehru University that usually about 1.2 lakh students appear for the entrance examination of JNU. And how many students really get admission? It's only about 2,000 or so. So that's what I'm talking about. While we are producing the large numbers of students through the expansion programs which have been undertaken by the universities, by the government, the admission to the good institutions is still very, very limited. Although the government has now expanded many IITs, many AIMS, and other institutions have been produced there. But the problem still exists. I come to the third point, and that is the excellence or the quality. I was an Humboldt fellow, and I read about Alexander von Humboldt in 19th century. He suggested that universities should not only remain themselves engaged in teaching, but have to be the fountain of knowledge generation, and therefore must develop capabilities to do research. And this is actually the model which many of the universities in USA, in Europe, and everywhere they follow. And also this is something which we follow in this country. But the present scenario is that none of our higher education university or any of the institution of this country ranks among the top 200 universities in the world. And that is the concern of our excellence or the quality which we are talking about. In fact, we wrote one paper which was based on taking up all the data from different universities in country and classified these universities based on the Carnegie system of classification, which we published. We found that if we use that criteria of Carnegie system, only 6 universities in this country came to the top rank universities, which could be classified as the research universities. So as was mentioned by the former president of NESCOM, India's higher education has a long schizophrenic condition. Some fine institutions and almost all others of rather lower quality. So India has to improve a lot on this front. I'm not saying that the quality of education is not good, but on a comparative basis, when I talk about at the world level, at the international level, a lot remains to be done on this one. And one of my co-authors on that paper, Professor Pankaj Jalota, he has recently written a book on building research universities in India and has brought out many important points in that. I don't know if some of you can lay your hands on that book. And he has mentioned that we have to improve our recruitment policy of faculty and also tackle many of the governance issues. And most importantly, some of these research universities, if we have to create of world class, need to be funded properly. I think the funding is another major criteria which is not able to produce good quality of infrastructure in our universities. The other point in order to improve the quality is basically the course structure, the courses that we offer. Of course, in many of the institutions, IITs and universities like JNU, we are ever improving on our course curriculum, But most of the state universities are still working on their old course curriculum structures. And it is very important, as is mentioned in the new education policy also, that we have to bring in interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary nature in our teaching. Now, if you remember, most of you would know that when the first university was created in 30th century, that was in Italy, there were only 7 subjects which were taught at that time. And today we have more than 8,000 to 9,000 subjects which are taught in different universities all around the world. So if your expertise is in one subject, you are ignorant in 7,000 other disciplines. So most of our decisions which we sometimes take and the deductions which are based on ignorance. And as we know, the knowledge in each of these fields is growing at a tremendous rate. And therefore, it is very, very important for us that in order to keep up the standard of teaching and research, we have to cope up with the new subjects which are emerging in different areas. And as really we'll have to develop a culture of transdisciplinarity in our universities. JNU was again one of the first universities where interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary teaching and research was undertaken in very, very early years. From this, I move on to empowerment and employability. Now, the direct causal link between higher education and employment that we once firmly established in a popular imagination has now been broken. That causality was always, according to some, an illusion. Education and training did not automatically guarantee jobs. But for a while, it was easy to believe that they did. And this is currently one of the major problems in our country. It's also, I think, in other places too. I know that many of the students who have completed their post-graduation, as well as if those who have done their PhD programs, are not able to find a good placement in a better university. This is a basic problem. And this problem, as some people say, is because of education, which has gone through a massification phase at the global level. There's too many people which have been educated at the lower level, at the college level, that we are unable to find as many jobs, employment opportunities in this country. So the education, though it makes people career ready, it does not make them job ready at this stage. Now, employment generation or creation has been one of the major concerns of the government of India, and many of the new private institutions which are coming are one of those places where they can be absorbed. But I think this is going to remain, unemployability of graduates is going to remain a major concern for years to come. I think what the present government is saying, that we should find more and more people who can build up their own entrepreneurship and instead of finding job for themselves, they should become job givers. So that is a slogan which they are making. Don't look for jobs, but create jobs for others. While this quality is a major issue which we are talking about, but I'm not too much on this aspect, because I sometimes feel that some of our graduates and PhDs which have passed out from IITs and better institutions, they are readily accepted in foreign countries. Many of you who are here probably have moved out from your education system you have taken here to US, to Europe, to other places, and so on and so forth. So the quality is concerned for some places, some institutions, but some of our good places, they do produce some of our best students from this country. And lastly, I touch upon this area of ethics and values. And this is a challenge in our education system. We need to train human resources who have values and become worthy citizens of this country, or worthy citizens, what we call as the global citizen. And we, as was mentioned, I think maybe I should quote this from Viktor Frankl, who said that nowadays what people do who are getting educated, they go after success, but he says that your aim should be that don't go after success, you go after improvement, and success will follow his. The happiness cannot be pursued. If you do well, the happiness will follow you. And therefore, our campuses, our colleges, I personally feel, must inculcate education with values. And ethical practices is something which is very, very important to be inculcated. I don't know if many of you would know who are from the field of science. This year, it was astonishing to see that almost like 10,000 papers were retracted from journals due to ethical and other issues. And many of these were from China, and some from India and other countries. Now, if this is the value system which we are giving to our students, to our researchers, I think we are going to mislead the research and development in this country. And therefore, I've been mentioned by many people that we should, along with many other courses, develop courses on philosophy, on ethics, on cognitive behavior, and also do courses on creative thinking, innovation, and social outreach and yoga practices. I think these are things which probably need to get somewhere brought in our education system, and formally train students in gratitude, in humility, in respect, in integrity, and so on and so forth. Sri Aurobindo, a great Indian philosopher, once said that each human being is a self-developing soul. The educational curriculum should be designed in such a way that it should enable and help the learner to educate himself, developing his own intellectual, moral, aesthetic capabilities, and also grow as a better human being. It should awaken the darkened areas and awaken the dormant centers of the brain. The objective of education, thus, is self-development and development of others and the society. And therefore, to build a system of education which is worthy of its commitment to society, one has to have moral and ethical standards in place. And this is what also Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan said: education to be complete must be humane. It must include not only the training of the intellect, but the refinement of the heart and discipline of the spirit. Today, there is explosion of knowledge in each and every field of study. But as someone has referred, there is no terminology as the explosion of wisdom. Education without values, without understanding of culture, one's own and that of others, without feelings and needs of the world society, will not lead to heart cooperation and understanding between nations. I think it is very important at this stage that we should develop international collaboration, because the way the education is expanding, the way the knowledge is expanding, it is very important that we should have international collaboration both in research as well as in teaching. The time has come, as is mentioned, to change the mindset and think beyond the boundaries of one's own cage and beyond the borders of one's country of origin. Collusion of mind with mind and knowledge with knowledge, as was said by Kerr, I feel can develop a sustainable society based on innovation and skills. It is time that we create enlightened and global citizen. Our connectivity has to be strategic. We need to impart wholesome education in our education systems. Thank you very much for listening to us. And lastly, I would mention that Bill Gates was here recently last month or last week he was here. He said that India has made incredible progress through investments in education, and these investments in education are paying off. The depth of talent in this country is phenomenal, and how investment of this talent and also in the digital technology in future is going to make a big difference for this country and through India to the world all around. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sopory, for this wonderful elucidation of the higher education system in India, starting from Vedic times. I mean, we typically, as you said, when we think of higher education, we think of the British transplanted system, but we have such a rich history. So from Vedic to the new education policy, this is really a masterful sweep of higher education in India, and how beautifully you have encapsulated in these 5 E's. The paper that you mentioned, the one that you circulated to me, we will put that paper along with the video of today's seminar on our YouTube channel very soon. So that then brings us to the Q&A session. But before we go to the Q&A session, I would request all of you to switch on your cameras. We just want to take a screenshot, a picture for our records. So if you could put on your cameras, please, just for a few seconds at least, we will then move on to the Q&A session. So I'll give, and as you do so, please try to frame your questions. You can use the raise hand feature in Zoom. I will then ask you. You can put it in the chat box. I can then ask Professor Sopory, or if you want, you can ask to be unmuted, and then you can ask Professor Sopory directly. But please keep your questions brief, because we do want to accommodate as many questions as possible. So Shamant, are you ready to take the screenshot?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, tell me when you are done.
Yeah, okay. Sector quick.
Done?
Yes,
Very
Professor.
good. Thank you, Shamant. So time for Q&A. So let's see. Please, you can raise your hand on Zoom, or let me check. Any raised hands? Not yet. Right.
I can probably ask while people are raising questions.
Yes, Balramji, please go ahead.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Professor Sopory. He just to let you know that he has been my teacher, still remains my teacher, and I learned so much from him, especially for latest. I remember latest papers. He will teach as if this is part of a textbook. So he knew how to convert information into communication. I think that's something to learn from him. His dedication and other things, of course, so obvious as time has gone. I was his teacher. I'm sorry, I was his student when he was maybe assistant professor, maybe beginning at that time in 70s. But we have been very close and have gotten to know more each other, and he is very helpful to me whenever I need. Now, my question. You, in the United States, I don't know whether you looked at the statistics, we are copying a lot from the system, and you said at the end that, we should collaborate internationally. And I'm going to just talk about not research as much first. For the education, US has a system. In India developed a National Education Policy 2020, in which Professor R.P. Singh is here, and he told me that they made a great progress of having semester system, which I think JNU had it for a long time. But what I want to say is the graduation rate in the US with this system that India is supposedly adopting is only 54% in 6 years. So it's a 6-year graduation, it's only 54%. I think 8 years is also something like 70%. So there is something we need to learn before we adopt. And some of the stuff that you said, that's one. And so I think I would like to maybe your response to that. And then US has a lot of private universities, but India having 2/3 of, the US has a lot of private universities, but most of the students still go to public institutions. They have so good institutions. I'm alarmed that you said that 2/3 of the students are going to private universities, which is really, they have to pay a lot more fees. So it looks like they can afford, or they're forced to afford, or the system of public universities or colleges is probably not as good, or at least they have been made to think that it's not as good.
Actually, in this country, I was mentioning that private universities which came up, mostly many of these are colleges which are there, private colleges, which cater to degree awarding at the BA level and different courses which are offered there. But private research universities are still very, very limited in this country. I think there are very few which are spending enough money to give their PhD programs, good PhD programs, and so on and so forth. So that number which is there in the private universities is from a certain elite group which you can talk about, which can afford to pay a higher fee structure. But at the same time, what I find in even lower income group people, my own people who work in our houses, and I talk to them, they are also shifting. You see our school system is government schools, and although we call them public schools, they are private schools basically. So many of them would end up sending their student rather from the government school into the private school. And they said, we like to save everything so that they get better education. So the total earning of the person nowadays, they are trying to divert that into educating their own children rather than spending on other items. So that is a different trend which has come up in this country. My own, one laborer who came to our house to work, and he was cutting across some trees and all that. And then he told me that, ye plant aap dekh rahe hain. He started describing that plant and all that, and how it takes water up. And I said, how do you know it? He said, I have studied till 12th, first year of college, and biology was my special subject. But because of money, he was not able to get access to the better colleges or other colleges. But now he's spending, he said, I spent all my money in order to educate my daughter. And he said, I teach her at home and getting her educated. So this trend which has come up, that I must get my children educated in order to empower them for better living, is a bigger change in this country nowadays. And therefore, government schools cannot handle all of this intake. Private organizations are coming up, but still many of these are far beyond the common person to access this education. That is a concern, and more concern, of course, you are developing schools in the villages and all that, but getting good schools. This was Radhakrishnan said in 1950s that you must have rural development, education in the rural areas should come up. But that is something which has not a good place. Colleges or schools have not come up there. So that is somewhere we are still lacking. Needs to be done further.
Just one very brief comment, because I think there are some other questions. Is that my experience is this image, like learning is one. I mean, we have a middle school and primary school that I went to when I was in my village.
Yeah.
And we have opened a school which is from K to 12. There are a lot more students coming to our school and not to the primary school, even though it's free. Because they just have this impression that things are not being taught well. So this image is an issue, and also perhaps maybe there is some truth to it. So because the government teachers, when they get the job, they just can do whatever they want. So
teachers
there is
and
an
teaching
ethical
is
issue.
major
Ethical issue that you raised. It needs to be raised not just with the government level, but the public in general, public level, which is a part of the education that I feel. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So,
Thank you, Balramji. So we have, Sopory ji, we have a question from Sanjeev Pathak. Sanjeev, you want to ask yourself?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I can answer.
Please go ahead.
Sanjeev.
Yeah. Very good morning, sir. The question is that as compared to countries outside India, especially in the West, I think I don't know whether the latest education policy has addressed this issue. The issue is that getting education in India, I think, is time barred. Possibly, if somebody wants to get a master's education in business or maybe in arts and sciences or maybe PhD admission after maybe an age of 50 or 60, maybe I think it is not possible. I think maybe doing a class 10th or class 12th in a different subject, if I want to do maybe in biology, I have been a math student. Now, if I want to do a class 12 in biology and then maybe think in terms of going into a medical degree, I don't think possibly it's possible in India now.
No,
As
I
this
think the education policy is addressing this issue because they are saying that the student should have a right of selecting different subjects. There should not be compartmentalization there. But how much it will be implemented is another thing. But if you see in JNU, it is possible that, or many other institutes, if you have done your one course in biology, then you can also go to the social sciences and take other subjects there. In fact, we used to have students, faculty who had done physics in US, if they were trained in physics. But when he came back to India, he was given teaching in, he'd also done a course in economics. So he started teaching economics there. So I think this kind of a change from one subject to other is envisaged, but implementation of this is not going to be that straightforward and easy. You're right. I think it's not easy. But as far as age group is concerned, for PhD program, I don't think there should be any age. I've seen that one person who was around the age of 70, he completed his PhD. That came in the news that he was able to get his degree in PhD program and completed his PhD, but may not be in the science subject, but in the other subjects, possibly it is, they can do it. So I think there are issues of this nature which needs to be addressed.
Thank you, sir.
Great talk, Professor So I had a question as to what you said, the quality improvisation and the ethics awareness and the lack of great universities such as JNU in every state, right? As Balram Singh pointed out, that every public university here is as good as a private university, and you have a bunch of them. You have thousands of these universities, they're all at the same level. But whereas in our country, different state universities are different level, only the elite institutes, as you rightly pointed, IITs or ICERs, they have the capable faculty and the equipment to do whatever the research that needs to be done. So to raise these kind of quality institutes, the government has to input a lot of money massively. You said Bill Gates appreciated that the country is doing well, but nowhere anywhere close to US or China.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I think
how much do you inform the policy makers about this? Stalwarts like you who have been there, who know the things, should be informing the public policy makers that the country can do better, because you have a lot of youth that is effluxing to the other countries for education. You can retain some of them. Even if they go out after education, they should be brought back. The efforts have to be placed in, and the measures have to be taken to either to stop the brain drain, or even if you allow it, you should try to get these educated minds back so that the quality of the education there would be raised again. I'm not against efflux of the students, because we have enough students. There are, as you said, there are so many students writing JNU entrance, only 2,000 get in there. But that should not be the case. Everybody should have an opportunity. If not JNU, some other equal or somewhat better university should be opening the doors for them. So maybe it should be privatization, such as Ambani spending thousands of crores on his son's marriage. Instead, he could be asked to open some university, right? I mean, like that kind of privatization of the higher education would only be able to transform the system from the roots.
There are actually a lot of private people are coming forward to develop these research universities which are there, especially even in NCR region, in Delhi and outside region. There are quite a few of those coming up. Ambani, you mentioned, I think he started this Geo University, and he's given competition to Google and all that they will beat other countries in AI. So there was some discussion going on, and he's putting a lot of money in developing AI and ML and other programs in that. So these people are coming. But what I'm saying is the numbers are so high in this country. The aspirations of people are also going very high, that probably it is not that easy to cater to needs of everybody. And therefore, what they are doing is that only the best probably will go get into the higher education. And somewhere in their education career, they will have to move out of into some kind of a technical programs or skill development programs, and other things will have to be taken. So many of the state, I know in the state where I am there in Haryana, they have developed they call the skill university. That was one of the first kinds. So, and they are opening different campuses of this one. So people will be taken to different tasks at different points in their career growth, and only those who are probably the best ones will get into the PhDs or postdocs and all that. You have also a point that people who are going abroad, because from India, many people are going abroad for PhDs or postdocs and other trainings in engineering and others. There are programs which have been developed to bring them back. I know at least in biology, they developed what is called as the Ramanujam Fellow, Ramalinga Swami Fellowship programs, which was trying to get them back, giving them good money in order to come and stay in some institutions and finally try to get a job and all that. But these programs are going on. But I know I have gone to many universities, interacted with many of the students who have completed even the highest degrees. The frustration level is high because not able to, and it's not only getting a job, but they're not able to give back. You know, they have the competence, but they do not have a place where they can apply that kind of technology or the things which they have built up.
Yeah.
And that's why they try to move abroad. As was mentioned, that people are going to Ukraine to do their programs. There are many students who do not find admission of MBBS in this country. They go to China. China is full of Indian students. They are going to Europe, even Korea, and many other places. So I think the movement of student outside is very large, but slowly we have to see that how do we equip our own institutions with the best of the minds.
Exactly. That should not be the case. We should be the source of education. As you said, right from the Indic civilizations, Nalanda, Takshashila used to be the centers of education, and people used to come to India to get educated.
Yeah.
Now our generations are, I mean, our kids are going out. They have a feeling that the abroad education is better than Indian education, probably right, and their affordability is high. A few years back, we used to get a lot of students from China, but the trend has stopped now. Actually, now, as you said, China is hosting other nations, you know, like India and other people. So why not India do something such a scale, massive scale?
As I was mentioning that in those ages, there were only few subjects which were there, which people were teaching or practicing on. Even till 1400, there were only 6-7 subjects people used to do it. And today you see the knowledge base is so high that I personally feel not every country can invest in all the subjects. And therefore, internalization and collaborations are becoming very, very important. I remember when we were students and we used to see this journal Nature, which is the best journal of science.
Yep.
You used to get papers which were written by individual scientists.
Exactly. Yep.
And there was a report which came up about 10-15 years back. The individual scientist is dead.
Yeah,
that
now
was the
you
title.
need a massive team of people.
Now you need massive people.
Gone are those days where you had topoisomerase, protein kinase, kind of inventions.
Those days are over. Of individuality is gone. I think it is the collectiveness which will bring about new knowledge in different fields. So therefore, people have to. It's a global world, I think. So we have to interact with each other. That's important in our education system. And that's the reason why the government of India is now allowing the foreign universities to open their campuses in this country. And as you would know that IITs are now opening campuses outside this country. Zanzibar, they have just opened, in UAE, they have opened a campus. So the idea is this, that you should interact with the global people.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. I would really appreciate the notes or the clip of this seminar to be hosted on somewhere on YouTube or somewhere. It's very informative, and you have done a lot of research, and the wisdom is something that we should archive somewhere for the benefit of others.
Thank you.
Yes, Shiva. I mean, our tradition is that all seminars are now they are online, so they are recorded and then we put them on your YouTube channel.
Thank you.
So, Sopory ji, you mentioned about AI, and I want to ask a question about AI, but a little different context. I mean, as you very rightly said, providing access to this very diverse clientele or population and spread across a very diverse geographical location, that is a big challenge. So what do you think could be the role of A, online education, and B, AI in education? Not education about AI, but using AI to deliver higher education to more Indians, not just in the big cities.
I think I actually had written about something on this, but because of time, I did not take it up. And the big advantage which AI is, or online education system is going to do is enhance the scalability of imparting education, online education. That is one impact. This would also become cost effectiveness. and also the administrative control would be very different. So I think if we go for this online method, I think Government of India is thinking in the same terms as US and developing MOOC courses and other things. But I think AI online education system would be one way to reach out to the remotest places, those who cannot afford to get into the colleges directly offline. That would be very important. And this role of this online education, I think, is far too important to be ignored, according to me. People had earlier, India had started this open university system. This IGNOU was started. Many state universities started this open university systems. But I think even more effective than that would be this online education system. We can do it. Of course, in science subjects, one will have to see how best this could be done. There could be some hybrid mode which can be made. But for other courses, which are social sciences, humanities, and others, probably this would be the way to go forward in this country also, in order to bring this one. And as somebody really reminded, somebody's talking about this age difference, the new education policy is basically talking about lifelong learning. So that is one thing which has been brought in there. I forgot to mention that one. There was somebody in the chat mentioned,
Yes.
Renu or somebody, that lifelong learning is one thing which will be appreciated or encouraged in this new education policy.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Sopory. And I saw Andrew Lin raised the hand. Andrew Lin, if you would
I
like,
know him.
would like to ask your question, please go ahead.
Actually, you asked the question in part, so let me extend that a little bit. One of the issues I have with the Indian education system is that the commercialization of tuition, such as the Baijus, and there's far more investment in that and far more money paid to get into institutions rather than the education that you get from the institution after that. But you answered partly what I was looking at in the future. Why is it that we cannot focus on these imparting skills rather than in imparting something that gets us into an institution like the IITs? Because they are really just tuitions and they're really just training for competitive exams. Now, why I say that is in the last 20 years when we've been working with IT, the half-life of skills in IT is something that we should look at as the half-life of skills, career skills in any subject. They were much shorter in IT, and you had basically in information technology, you had to relearn skills in about 5 years to 7 years' time. And this is happening in most fields. And now with AI coming in, access to knowledge is now free. So it's not that you have to go to an institution to get knowledge. You have to learn how to utilize that knowledge as a career skill, and these are not so easy to come. So the real question is the university as a campus or an environment really necessary, or does the individual have to be able to find resources where he can pick up these career skills?
The only AI and other things will provide, as I was mentioning, unprecedented opportunities to study. I think that is one thing which, of course, this online other things is there. But the points which you're mentioning about Baijus and other training places which are there, I think it's such a hype which your parents and others built up that unless you get into IITs or medical and other things, your career is no good. And they end up spending so much money in order to get themselves, their children trained for competitive examinations which are there. Skills, as I was just mentioned, there are many places where instead of IITs, you have polytechnics and skill universities which are coming up. So that is one thing which we need to encourage. Ministry of Skill Development had thought of providing at least 10,000 positions for skill development courses around this country. And that has not taken off as well, but many of the states are trying their best to develop these skill universities. Let's see how it moves further, but many people, these tuitions, which you are talking about, is something, a craze which is there, I think. We all have done it, I think, for with our children probably. And more and more, the idea is that people want to get into engineering degree because it is easier to get a job or to go abroad. And they look at a career which is far more easier to move from such institutions rather than if somebody comes to JNU, does his PhD, and then he's searching for a postdoc or something else and trying to find a job. So from parent perspective, they are looking for a shortcut or the easy way to find a job for their wards through IITs, through doctorates, through other programs, rather than going through the routine of BSc, MSc, PhD programs. So I think there are different ways people think about it.
If I may
Thank
ask
you
you
so
more
much.
for that,
Say that again?
I want to follow up with the question, quick question there.
Quick question, please.
Yeah. Should the higher education be subsidized, or should the government be subsidizing the before higher education, I mean elementary education or the K-12 kind of education? The fact that the higher education is subsidized, everybody goes to all these tutorings or private colleges up to 12th, and then after that everybody wants to get into government medical colleges or IITs to get the free higher education, and then from there they emigrate or do whatever the job search. But the question is that should our policy be different? Should the lower education should be subsidized and the higher education should not be subsidized? Or even if you subsidize, it should be for certain disciplines. There should be a rule that if somebody has gone through the subsidized higher education, they should serve the country rather than emigrating after the training or whatever. I mean, there are measures in place, but just find it difficult to reconcile that the higher education is subsidized, whereas in US, everybody pays the tuitions, though there are some public universities. So there's something fundamentally missing there. That's what I feel. What's your take?
I don't know. This is rather difficult to answer, but I personally, it's a individual opinions. I feel that even higher education at this time, the way the point of time we are in this country, I think higher education needs to be subsidized. I think there should be not a very, very high fees, especially in the public universities, which I'm talking about the central universities or even state universities. If you make the fee structure very high, like you have in Harvard or other places, there. So I don't think many of the people, the best of the minds, even if they are there, will not be able to get admission in these places. At school level, ours is a very different perspective. At school level, at public or private schools, and the fee is very, very high. Not so in the government schools. But higher education, I personally feel that we should keep it subsidized as far as much we go. I know in JNU, I was facing this problem all the time, that your fee structure is very low. And this has been a public debate also why the student in JNU pays very less fee. I was even called to the parliament once, a parliamentary committee, and they said that, why don't you raise the fee in JNU? And I argued against that, and gave them reasons why it should not be done. I can raise the fee from whatever it was by 100%, and the maximum amount of money which I will be able to generate was not more than 2 crores in a year. And I told that for government, 2 crores is nothing. It is not even peanuts, and I think, using that money, if 90% of the students at that university are going to get educated and serve the society in one way or the other, you have recovered the cost of what you have invested in education. I think it depends upon different viewpoints.
now that the loans are so abundant, people are taking, even middle class students are coming over to abroad. What I thought was probably the affordability is good enough to, so that, I mean, some of this trend could be reversed. That's what I meant to say. That we could invest in more privatization universities and things like that. You're right. Again, you have to take other factors into consideration whether to subsidize higher education.
Right.
Yeah.
In
So
fact, I had
thank
a
you.
student,
Yeah, go
you
ahead.
know.
Go ahead, Sopory.
I was
Sorry.
just mentioning, there was a student who, there are many such examples I'm just giving the example of JNU, but many other universities are there, who would not have been able to get into higher education if the fee structure was very high. This was a student who was son of a cobbler in Odisha. And by his sheer hard work, he was able to get admission in JNU. And because the fee was not very high, he was able to pursue his education. He once came to me and he was working in international studies, School of International Studies. Coming from that background, he was trying to write a book, and he's asked me to write the preface of this book. I said, it's not my area of subject. I can write a preface for this one. But I asked him, what is your vision? The place from where you have come, and now you are in JNU. What are you looking forward to? And he said, sir, one day I want to represent this country in United Nations. He was working on UN. You see the vision, from where he came, through a system of higher education, JNU or other universities which provided because of subsidized education. He has a vision of that nature that he wants to serve this country at United Nations. So this is something which we need to build up at this stage in this country. And that becomes very, very important. That's the meaning of the education which we are talking about.
I was just going to say, Professor Sopory, I'm one of those examples also. If the fee was not that low, I wouldn't be able to afford to come to a School of Life Sciences, which is true. On the other hand, I think this gives a mentality today. The 20 rupees is still the mess, the room fee for the hostel. It gives people the entitlement. I'm talking about alumni. They talk about all the time they want to get freebies because they want, I mean, you were there when Vice Chancellor Alumni Association opened. They want, everybody just wants freebies because they have been used to it. Whereas, other places, alumni really pay back to their institution and build it. So I think we need to educate people that, like you were talking about the cobbler's son, who had very high regard and wanted to contribute. So while we are getting, we should be very grateful to that we got this, and then we should pay back rather than continue to think that we get, the government will continue or the university will continue to take care of us. I think that should not be the case. Somehow this needs to be communicated. Thank you.
Yeah, alumni can help, a lot.
With that, thank you so much again, Sopory ji, for this wonderful talk. And I'm sure once we put it on YouTube, some of us will watch it again because there is so much to learn from. And we do not know our next seminar schedule yet. We are in the midst of discussion with the speaker. So once it's finalized, I will definitely send you. So with that, thank you again. Namaste.
Thank you so much. Thank you for interacting with all of you. Thanks. Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Bye-bye.
Hello, goodbye. Good to see everyone.
Great.